And in the press conference this week, this is what Jose had to say. Yes, I need a striker, but I want to make it very clear that the club, the structure above me, knows that I need a striker and also wants a striker. So he's calling out higher management. He's publicly saying, I want it, I want everyone to know, but I need the support. So how crucial is it for Spurs to get a striker into the club before the transfer window closes?
It's really important because we know the importance of Harry Kane, and we know that he will score goals. He's doing it every season, as well as we know that he's going to catch a couple of injuries and won't play the full season. And you need someone to replace him. But at the same time, you can't complain about the fixture because this is what you want. You aspire to be a top 6 club, and this is what top 6 clubs get every season. So once you're there, you need to find a solution. And if it doesn't have the backing from the club, that put the manager and the team in a difficult position. And I'm sure the higher people above him knows that. So it's for them to take a decision. Do we want to push and be one of those top 6 clubs? And then we have to invest, or are we happy to just gamble on Harry Kane being fit all the season or not, and maybe at the end of this season be in a position where we don't really want to be? That's I think as a manager, you can't do much more than just express your point of view and then wait for a reaction for the people above you.
Your take on the importance of getting a striker in for Tottenham, Gary, because I'll stress again, it's been a long time since Harry Kane went a season without an injury, a serious, long-term injury, that is.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty obvious that Spurs need to sign another striker. So who's available? Who can they go for? What budget have they got? You know, Harry Kane is the #1 choice, so whoever they bring in is not going to become the #1 striker for the club. So it has to be somebody who's prepared to be a bit part player to some extent. You know, Son can play up front, Lucas Moura can play up front, but I personally think that isn't their best position, so therefore they're better in wide positions. So yeah, you need to bring in another striker. I always, and we're going to probably shift on to it, I dare say, but I always look at the clubs who've been relegated out of the Premier League at the back end of the previous season, and who might be available from that club. And you know, if you look at Bournemouth, who got relegated, for example, you know, Callum Wilson was a player I thought Spurs might go for, but he's gone to Newcastle. That's not going to happen. There's Josh King, isn't there, who's still at Bournemouth, so that's maybe a possibility. Watford got relegated, and I'm sure a lot of Spurs fans would say, well, no, Troy Deeney isn't for us. But I have a feeling that Troy Deeney might be a good asset for Spurs to have. I think he would be happy to come to Spurs. I think he would be happy to be that kind of bit part player, take his opportunities when they come along. He'd offer something a little bit different as well. But it's difficult to find. If it was easy to find another striker for Spurs, I guess they would have done it by now.
Well, so you're an ex-Bournemouth player. It wasn't too long ago that you were at the club. I'm sure you've watched. In fact, we've covered Bournemouth games together, live and up close. Someone like Josh King, do you reckon he could fit the bill at Spurs? And also, what kind of striker should Spurs try to get? Would it be a young striker who would be hungry for appearances, wouldn't mind being on the bench, or maybe an older striker who's resigned to the fact that maybe his best days are behind him? I think of Llorente when he was at Spurs, and let's not forget the role he had in order to get them and help them to the Champions League final against Liverpool.
Yeah, I think that the problem they'll have is they need to find a striker who will score a goal, but will accept to be on the bench as well for most of the season when Harry Kane will be playing. So there's not many strikers with good quality who are in form, keep scoring goals, who will accept to be in that position. So that's a lot more difficult than we can imagine to find this type of striker. I think Callum Wilson was a really good option. He went to Newcastle. Josh King, yes. I mean, great energy going forward. Does he have the same quality as Callum Wilson to score goals? I don't think so. Troy Deeney, I think, is a really, really, really good option. Great character. I can see him having a really good influence as well in the dressing room, and definitely be happy to be in the Premier League and be more like a second striker and be there when you need him. He's done it this season at Watford. He didn't play every single game. He had 3 injuries, but still he was putting some really good performance. So that will be for me as well, same as Gary. I think a good choice.
Yeah, and we've seen that Jose seems to like having big characters with big personalities join the dressing room. Joe Hart, we know how big a character he can be. Any other areas do you think that need strengthening, Gary? Obviously, right back was an issue. That seems to have been sorted. A holding midfielder, that seems to have been addressed as well. Any other areas for backup or first-team spots do you see?
Well, Spurs need to get a couple of players fit at the moment, that is for certain, because I'm looking at the 2 central defenders. For me, Alderweireld is right up there, good enough for the Premier League. There's no question about that. I look at Dyer and I'm not totally convinced at times. They've got Davinson Sanchez, who again came with a good reputation, but hasn't really developed particularly. So I think it's down almost to individuals to step up to the mark and deliver. If Spurs can get the odd player, so yes, a striker, I'm looking at a really dominant central defender because I don't really see one other than Alderweireld there at the moment.
All right, well, if you heard me just as the match finished, I said we'll also talk a little bit about formations for the rest of the season. Going to throw this out there. If you want to have new signings, join the club and to be happy to get some game time, can you change formations? Can we see Spurs play with 2 up front, 2 recognised strikers, that is, with Kane and let's say Josh King or Troy Deeney joins the club? Perhaps in certain games you can have that fluidity to change things around. I mean, Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin both playing up front for Everton. Sylvain, is that plausible? Can you work on 2 formations in training to see you out for the season?
I think you have to. You have to be quite fluid and be able to change your formation and adapt to the opposition as well, and adapt to circumstances. It could be injuries, it could be a type of game, it could be a different competition. That's very important, because if you're too stiff and too rigid in your formation, you only expose yourself to some problem long term. So I think both managers, it could be Everton or it could be Tottenham, will have to look at those type of solutions, for sure.
Gary, is what I said, what I posed as a question, does that make sense, or am I being ludicrous?
No, you have to be able to play in a different way. Yeah,
but
without
for Spurs,
doubt.
Is it possible to play the 2 up front? 2 strikers, 2 recognised strikers? Could you see that?
Well, yes is the answer, and I have seen Spurs play that way to some extent, where Son has played very much up front and in actual fact ahead of Harry Kane. But they've certainly played as a 2 up front in recent seasons, and I think it's worked reasonably well also. Yes, if Jose Mourinho is only going to play one way, then I think he's limiting him and his players, to be honest with you. And I don't believe that is the case. I think, there are subtle changes and he will make changes. And I'm sure that Spurs on the training park, when they have some time to do it in between games, and you would normally do it pre-season, is to develop an understanding of playing different formations. Yeah, of course. We're talking about elite players here.
But you get my gist. I mean, Son obviously has played very far forward as well, but an actual recognised striker like Harry Kane is. I'm sure you understand my drift, right?
Yes, of course I do. And so I'm just trying to think, did Llorente and Harry Kane ever play together as a 2 up front? I think there were times when they were both on the park together.
Chasing games when they were losing, predominantly.
Yeah, possibly so. So the answer to your question, I believe, yes, Spurs can play with 2 up front, i.e. an out-and-out striker with Harry Kane, who is regarded as an out-and-out striker who can also drop and sit and balance off and be a bit of a number 10 as well.